We are so quick in undressing and not quick in getting off what you call the lust of the flesh. So, because, like I mentioned, that loneliness attracts desperation and it attracts what you call situational relationship whereby, and there's a quote my wife normally say that don't lower your standards for someone else's appetite. That yes, your intelligence will take you to campus, but your values and your character will sustain in campus. If you want to really relate well or marry well and stay married, make sure that you ask yourself the three questions. Why am I here? Where will I spend my eternity? Then probably, who will I spend my life with? Yeah, so I think this chapter 2, verse 18 to 21 really speaks a lot. And that's why the nakedness that Adam and Eve experienced in 25 to 25 of Genesis chapter 2 did not come in the space of dating. It came when now they had to live because we are so much quick in getting off our clothes than getting off our flesh. We are so quick in undressing and not quick in getting off what you call the lust of the flesh. So we must ask ourselves that why did Adam at the last part of the chapter 2 is when they were able to be seen naked? So what is my ultimate goal? Do I expose my flesh first or expose my faith, expose my belief system, expose my values? Or we expose our flesh then talk about the values first of all. So I think the place of loneliness is because of seeking to find versus seeking his kingdom first.
No, it's perfectly good because it's really powerful what you talked about there, that we really need to assess our foundation. And I like those three things that you've talked about, that we first start by defining for ourselves, where will I spend eternity? So you're focused on the things that are not seen. I think the Bible tells us that quite a number of times, that those things that are not seen are usually more important than the ones that are seen. So we can ground ourselves in those things because they matter more, they carry more weight, they'll help us make better decisions. When even for the things that we see, because when we are relating now, those are things we can see. You're relating to another person that you can see, but before you start relating to them, you also told us that we have to first share and let them know, these are my values, this is my faith, and these are my beliefs, and these are the non-negotiables. So in which case then you're more likely to start on the right footing, because when you're defining your values, your beliefs, and your faith, in there you also thought about your purpose. So why am I here on earth? And then that's when it comes to the last part of it. Who do I want to spend my time with here before I go to eternity on this side of life? Thank you so much for that. It's really powerful. I wish some of us had this kind of information, when we were in campus. Not to say that we did make mistakes. It's just to say you're more informed. You're making decisions from a more informed perspective. So I believe there are more of us who are benefiting from this. Okay, now we'll explore that line of loneliness a bit more, but from a slightly different perspective. And I know it will tie back to a bit of what you've told us, but please explain to us, can loneliness make somebody lower standards that they would normally not compromise on?
Yeah, I think it's true because, like I mentioned, that loneliness attracts desperation and it attracts what you call situational relationship whereby you're getting it here because of I want to feel up or wet. The word loneliness means that you have part of you that you feel need to be maybe supported, quote unquote, but I can't support it on my own. I'm looking for someone to support it. So yes, it can lead to probably even making wrong choices because I am not really pursuing what I'm pursuing based on my personal choices, but because I want to really, quote unquote, fit in. And that's why we talk about, I normally say, non-defined relationship. Talking about you're not defining relationships. And like we talk about can literally compromising because you don't have an end goal from the beginning. And so you're like really getting into it to test the waters and see whether it's going to work because to mention about the negotiables, and this is very key because you see, Esther, the challenge we have in terms of understanding loneliness and being alone is because of the template. We have I normally say we have a warp view of marriage, and we think marriage is going to fix a few things in our lives. So I'm getting at this dating scene because of fixation, and there's a template I have about marriage that I think is going to really probably dilute a few things in my life. And now that makes us live in a place whereby we don't have standards. And there's a quote my wife normally say that don't lower your standards for someone else's appetite. And that brings the aspect of loneliness versus intentionality. So James chapter 2, 24, I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that will not take a wife of my son from the daughters of Canaanites, among whom I dwell. For but you shall go my country and my family and make a wife for my son Isaac. The servant said to him, the all of it is there's intentionality. The moment you operate under intentionality, you'll be able to put what you call the guardrails. Guardrails are the ones you see on the roads, the one that when maybe there's a danger zone somewhere, guards that you don't, so that you can drive carefully. But the guardrails never limit your movement. You still go to Thika, you still go to where you're going because the guardrails only safeguard you. That's what Abraham instructions to the servant, that I'm giving you the guardrails. I'm not limiting you. You explore, but this person must be in this space that I'm describing. Versus what you call fence. Most of us look at guardrails as restrictions. They're just accountability. So when someone operates under loneliness, they don't what to do. They're not intentional. They don't have, like you see, what was being discussed here. If you notice them, the way, why are you getting this? They tell you because I'm not dating. Or they tell you because I'm 20 years old, I'm no longer a teenager, or because I'm in campus. And that means you're not getting it because of any reason, because the reason should be bigger. If the definition of what you're getting it is not clear from the beginning, then you won't be able to pick it when you're not dating. So if you don't define it from the onset, why am I dating? Why am I getting this relationship? Then you will not be able to do it in the course of it. Normally, if you don't define it from the onset, it will be very hard for you to do it, to define it or to get the alter, because you'll have a blind vision. This is a place whereby we don't have intentionality, and anytime we don't have intentionality, we don't have boundaries. It's okay, but the place of non-accountability brings what you call a compromise and sin. One, loneliness comes out of non-intentional definition of where you want to go to. And number two, it gets you off what you call accountability, because your feelings drives you more than your vision. Feelings will always probably do what? Push you to cross the boundaries. If you have a vision, you'll be able to be guided by that vision because it becomes a guardrail. So yes, it's true. Loneliness breeds compromise because it is driven by feelings. But if you want to overcome that, then define it from the beginning. Vision creates accountability and boundaries. Loneliness is undefined relationship that can be compromised at any onset because feelings will always be the driving force in our lives.
Thank you, Douglas. I like that what you're telling us, that in that situation of loneliness, why most times people end up in some compromise is because then they are leading with feelings over vision. When you have vision, you have it well defined, and you, as part of that, you've also defined what accountability looks like, and you've defined what your boundaries should be. Thank you for really going into details around that, and even using an example from the Bible for Isaac, and when Abraham was wanting to get a spouse, a wife for Isaac, that he really defined what that should be.
Very
and it's
true.
a pointer for us then to also predefine, before we get there, what kind of relationships do you want to get into and why? And plus the other three questions you talked about in the previous question, the major one being, where do I want to spend eternity? That being what builds everything else or predefines everything else. Okay, now we go back to the students and we explore a little bit more, maybe very briefly. Why do intelligent students sometimes make relationship decisions that seem completely out of character?
Oh, I love that question. And being intelligent is very, I think, broad, because we can be very good academically in terms of probably intellectual, but we haven't worked on ourselves. And that's one of the biggest probably challenges. But what I'm saying is, anyone who qualified to go in campus, they have a different view of life in terms of they've worked hard. They've merited going to campus, which is good. But now the question comes in, have you worked on yourself? Who are you besides an A in maths? Who are you besides a B in maths? And I can say, Proverbs chapter 1, as you go towards 20 something, it's about wisdom is calling on the street. And it says that this wisdom is calling on the street is telling us what is happening. Yeah, Genesis chapter 1, verse 20. It says, wisdom calls aloud outset. Wisdom raises her voice in the open squares. Verse 21, she cries out in the chief concourse. At the opening of the gates in the city, she speaks out. How long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? You scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge. That's what I want to say. There's what you call knowledge, and there's what you call intellectual wisdom, what you have learned in school. So knowledge comes by seeing that wisdom is called to it. And we've seen these things happening. We've seen, God forbid, one of the presidents of the superpowers or the greatest nations in the world. We know what happened. He succumbed to sexual perversion and he was removed from office. Did he has all the qualities of becoming of getting into the office? Yes, in terms of the requirements. But he succumbed. He never finished his term. Why? Because not because he was not a bright person, but because he didn't work on his values. So I have to say this: that yes, your intelligence will take you to campus, but your values and your character will sustain in campus. So what you need to work on beside your academic progress and successes is values. So why do intelligent students still succumb to negative peer pressure that leads them into wrong relationships? Because they are so, I can say, with books and they forget character and value. What sustains us in life is not our intellectual, it's our values and our characters. What defines who you are is not your success. You're not doctor that because of your papers, but your doctorate is defined by your discipline in life. What are the disciplines that you really value in life? So yes, you can be good academically, but you must also have a called discipline. Discipline means I must understand that my values decide who I am. That's why I normally say that discipline is a sandwich of values and choices. So values will determine the choices you make, and the choices you make will lead to the person you become, which is your discipline. And so, yes, it's okay if they succumb. Why? I said because of this knowledge that they hate. They know that they hate in the book of Jesus, Proverbs chapter 1, verse 22. They hate knowledge because they feel they can make it. So until you come back to the knowledge of God and submit to his leadership and lordship, then our successes in life can never take us anywhere. So yeah, build your values. Your values will be able to determine the choices you make, and those choices will be able to bring out the who you are, because they're a product of our choices, which are determined by our values. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Douglas, for reminding us the importance of values and choices, and also taking us through that text in Proverbs and painting a picture of the difference between intelligence and knowledge, which I think many of us may have not heard of before. And it reminds me of a verse in the Bible that says that your talent will take you before great men, but your character will keep you there, which is closely similar to the verse that you have read, in the sense that your hard work may have made many of our children land in university, but what makes them make the right decisions when it comes to relationships is the character that they've developed before, defining their values, being very clear on their faith, and also being very clear on their boundaries, and even pre-deciding like, why in the first place do I even want to be in a relationship? Because sometimes I also think of it, you don't even have to be in a relationship simply because everybody else is in one. Because you may be thinking, okay, for me, I'm in campus. I think I want to focus on my studies first. And it's 4 years, 4, 5, 6, depending on the course you're taking, but it's lesser time in the grand scheme of things. And you have more time outside campus to do some of these things. Well, everyone wants to be in a relationship. You could choose to be different and decide at this point in my life, a relationship is not a priority. It will be a priority probably in the next phase. But for now, I just want to focus on studies. And that's all part of pre-deciding which route you want to go.